In 2013, a tugboat capsized off the coast of Nigeria. All 12 crew members were presumed dead. Then, 60 hours later, a diver doing body recovery found a man alive, sitting in an air pocket, in complete darkness, 100 feet underwater. On May 26, 2013, the tugboat Jaskin 4 was towing an oil tanker off the coast of Nigeria, near the Escravos terminal in the Niger Delta. The sea was rough. At some point during the night, a sudden swell destabilized the tugboat. It capsized and sank in approximately 100 feet of water. There were 12 crew members on board. The alarm was raised. But by the time rescue vessels arrived, the tugboat was on the ocean floor. There was no sign of survivors on the surface. No life rafts. No flares. No radio distress calls after the initial capsize. The 12 crew members were presumed dead. For 60 hours, the wreck sat on the bottom of the Atlantic. A salvage and body recovery operation was organized. Divers were sent down to retrieve the bodies for return to their families. It was not a rescue mission. It was a funeral. Diver Nico van Heerden entered the overturned wreck with a helmet-mounted camera and a flashlight. The ship was upside down, disorienting to navigate. Rooms that had been on the upper decks were now at the bottom. Corridors were flooded. Debris floated in the dark water. The visibility was poor. Van Heerden methodically searched the wreck, moving from compartment to compartment. He had already located several bodies. Then he entered the galley, the ship's kitchen area. In the darkness, his hand made contact with something. It moved. It grabbed him. Harrison O'Keane, the 29-year-old ship's cook, was alive. The footage from Van Heerden's helmet camera, which was later released and went viral, captures the moment. You can hear the diver's sharp intake of breath. You can see O'Keane's hand, pale and trembling, reaching out from the darkness. For a moment, neither man seems to understand what is happening. The diver thought he was touching a corpse. O'Keane thought he was hallucinating. O'Keane had been in the water for approximately 60 hours. Nearly 3 days. When the tugboat capsized, O'Keane had been in the officer's bathroom. As the ship flipped upside down, he was thrown around the compartment. Water flooded in rapidly. But because the ship was inverted, an air pocket formed in what had been the lowest point of the bathroom, which was now the highest point. The air pocket was roughly 4 feet tall and 6 feet wide. O'Keane found the pocket and positioned himself with his head above the waterline. The water reached his chest. The room was in complete darkness. The air was humid and cooling rapidly. He was wearing only his underwear. For the next 60 hours, Harrison O'Keane sat in that air pocket and waited. He had no food. He had no fresh water. He had no light. He had no way to signal for help. He did not know whether anyone was looking for him. He did not know how much air he had left. He could hear the ocean around him. The creaking of the ship's hull. The movement of water through the flooded compartments. And other sounds he later described as fish and crabs feeding on the bodies of his dead crewmates in the rooms adjacent to his air pocket. He prayed. He recited every prayer he knew, over and over, for 3 days. He later told interviewers that the praying was the only thing that kept him sane. The physics of his survival were extraordinary. An air pocket in an enclosed space underwater is a finite resource. As a person breathes, they consume oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. In a sealed pocket, the oxygen concentration drops while carbon dioxide rises. Eventually, the CO2 concentration becomes toxic, and the person loses consciousness and drowns. O'Keane survived for 60 hours because the air pocket was not perfectly sealed. Small gaps in the ship's structure allowed some gas exchange with the surrounding water. The cold temperature of the water, roughly 20 degrees Celsius, slowed his metabolism, reducing his oxygen consumption. And the size of the pocket was large enough to contain several hours' worth of breathable air. But he was running out of time. Had the divers arrived even a few hours later, the air quality in his pocket would likely have deteriorated to lethal levels. Bringing O'Kane to the surface was nearly as dangerous as his ordeal underwater. After 60 hours at a depth of 100 feet, his body tissues had absorbed significant amounts of nitrogen from the compressed air he was breathing. If brought to the surface too quickly, the nitrogen would form bubbles in his blood, a condition called decompression sickness, or the bends, which can cause paralysis, organ damage, and death. The dive team fitted O'Kane with a diving helmet and slowly guided him out of the wreck. He was then placed in a diving bell and brought to the surface over several hours, with controlled decompression stops. He spent an additional 2 days in a decompression chamber on the surface vessel. Harrison O'Kane survived. He was the only survivor among the 12 crew members of the Jaskin 4. After his rescue, O'Kane suffered from nightmares and psychological trauma. He was afraid of the ocean. But in an extraordinary decision, he chose to confront his fear directly. He trained as a professional diver. He now works for a commercial diving company, spending his working life underwater in the same ocean that nearly killed him. The helmet camera footage of his rescue has been viewed millions of times. The moment when his hand reaches out of the darkness and grabs the diver remains one of the most extraordinary pieces of survival footage ever recorded. 60 hours. Alone. In the dark. 100 feet below the surface. With the air running out and the sounds of death all around him. And he survived because there happened to be a pocket of air in a bathroom of an upside-down ship, just large enough to keep one man breathing for 3 days. The ocean is vast and indifferent. It does not choose who lives and who dies. But sometimes, in the mathematics of pressure and air and cold and luck, the numbers work out for one person. Harrison O'Kane was that person. If you found this fascinating, subscribe for more stories like this. We post new videos every week.